But thank you all for joining. Welcome to the Puget Sound Estuarium's Discovery Speaker Series. We host these talks each month from October through March. So this is our second to last one of the season. They're on the first Thursday of each month, 6:30 to 7:30. And so make sure you catch next month's as well. And then we'll take a break, but we'll come back in October. For these talks, we like to invite scientists, earth advocates, artists, environmental educators to share their current work or research, share about their organizations they're a part of, so that we can spark conversations. So I really encourage you all to get those questions flowing and type them into the chat so we can start that conversation. And then 15 minutes at the end, if we don't get to everyone's questions, I can forward it to our speaker so you can still get your questions answered in the future. For those on Zoom, the Q&A, for those watching on Facebook Live, type them into the comments below, and then we'll see them on this side as well. And then if you need something to do, we have that coloring page. Make sure to fill it out and then send it to us, a picture of it so that we can see your beautiful art. Today's was done by one of our volunteers, and it is a European bee eater. These birds are really colorful, so that's why it was chosen for today's coloring page, even though we don't see them here in Olympia. And then if you have to leave early, we do record it, and it will be on Facebook after it's done today. And then we'll also post it on YouTube for you to share it with people who you think would also be interested in listening to this presentation. So my name is Clarissa. I'm the program volunteer coordinator, and I am pleased to welcome Alex Troutman. He is a wildlife biologist. He's currently getting his master's in biology from Georgia Southern University. His research focuses on the relationship between birds and insects in intertidal wetlands. Today, he'll be focusing on studying birds and waterfowl in general, and about being a black birder. As a black birder, he is very passionate about increasing diversity in the STEM field, from Blacks in Marine Science to Black Birders Week to leading nature hikes within his community. And so without further ado, take it away, Alex.
Thanks for having me. As Clarissa said, my name is Alex Troutman. I'm a wildlife biologist, environmental educator, and science communicator. So a little bit about me is I'm from Austell, Georgia. I have a bachelor's degree and now also a master's degree from Georgia Southern University. And over the last 8 years or so, I have been working in the natural resource field as either a zookeeper or an educator at Georgia Aquarium, but also with several different federal and private agencies as a wildlife biologist. So my path to being a wildlife biologist started out as a young boy. I was always interested in wildlife, in the snakes and frogs that were running from the lawnmowers when I was cutting grass and doing other yard chores like raking leaves. And I knew I wanted to do something with wildlife, with animals, but I wasn't necessarily sure what it was and how to do it. So for the longest time, I thought I would be a veterinarian because that was one of the two representations of what a Black person working with animals that I had. It was either be a vet or be a farmer. So I chose to study towards being a vet. And I did that in college for about 2 years until I realized the like depression that vets have. So I actually switched my major to a minor in biology and was going to be a middle school teacher. So I went through another year of schooling, and during that time, I took a couple of field biology courses. One of them is ornithology, the study of birds, and the other was mammalogy, studying mammals. And during that time, it was heavily outside course, and I realized like I can study animals, especially birds, and get paid to do it. So I immediately switched my major back to biology, this time with a field biology focus on it. So during that time, I did a lot of hands-on experience working with animals at a free-range organic cattle farm, volunteering, and then doing educational outreach at that farm. And then once I graduated, I got a job working with the Student Conservation Association and AmeriCorps as a park ranger in Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And there I did a lot of work engaging school groups, Boy Scouts, and people who visit the park into nature, and showing them that not all snakes are bad. Really, there's no such things as a bad snakes. All snakes are good and beneficial. But I was just educating them on snakes and nature. And then from there, I went and got a job with the Georgia Aquarium and Zoo Atlanta at the same time. At Zoo Atlanta, I was a educator as well as someone who worked with the tractable animals. And the tractable animals are small animals that we could take to school groups and other organizations. They were kind of our ambassador animals for the zoo. So I did the zoo and the aquarium for about 8 months before I finally got a job with the federal government, working with the Fish and Wildlife Service as a wildlife biologist. And today I'm going to talk to you all about ornithology. So again, ornithology is the study of birds, and I will dive into my work studying birds as a federal employee, and talk a little bit about some of my research as a master's student and how I engage others in nature through using birds as one of those tools. So again, ornithology is the study of birds, and individuals who study birds, we are called ornithologists. So how do we study birds? There's many different ways that birds are studied. Some of them are what techniques are known as point count, is where you're actually out looking for birds and counting the number that you see. Others, it's using banding. So there's several different types and reasons that you band. One of the ones that I worked with is monitoring avian productivity and survivorship. And that's usually done during the summer months. So from May to early August. And during that time, we're looking at birds that how they are surviving throughout the year. So in between the migration points, we're looking at their survival rate. I'll go in more detail about how we are understanding this a little bit later. And then another banding technique that we use is looking at the habitat usage and migration. So when we're looking at habitat usage, when we're banding these birds, we're looking at, let's say there's a area that was historically a grassland, and now it has been converted to a forest, or it was a forest and now it has been mowed over, and it's going to be a grassland. So during that time, we go out and study the birds, placing giant nets in these habitats and seeing what birds are there. And then if we're watching it transition from, let's say, a forest to or a grassland to a forest, we're going to take note to see what birds are coming in as the trees are getting taller, and the vegetation is going from the grass to more woody types. So we're doing these banding days multiple times throughout the year when we're looking at the habitat usage and migration, and that's during spring and fall. So birds migrate twice a year to their breeding grounds and then to their wintering grounds. And we do a lot of banding work during those times to see when birds are migrating, and then also to get the population estimates. So with a lot of the waterfowl and game species, so game species are birds or any animal that is hunted, but for our case, it's ducks, quail, things like that. When those are being hunted, we will also band those to get the estimates of what birds are, the population is before hunting, and then that helps us know when we can add more to the quota, allow for bag limits, so how many you can harvest in a year, or decrease that if the population has decreased. We don't want people to continue to have the same bag limits. So that's one way that we study birds using banding. Another way that we do is looking at the diet. So we can look at pellets for owls and some hawks. And then also we're using fecal analysis. So using chemistry to see what bugs or minerals and nutrients are in the bird's poop. And we also can look at some of the nests and cavities that they use. So looking at like this picture right here, woodpecker holes, both of these, this large one right here is one type of woodpecker. It's the pileated woodpecker. And then this one right here, these lines going across, it's from a yellow-bellied sapsucker. So looking at those and seeing what trees they're utilizing, seeing how close they are to urban areas can also tells a lot about the birds that are utilizing those areas. And other ways that we look like is nest searching. So for my master's research project, I spent hours in a tidal marsh looking through grass for a grass nest of a seaside sparrow. So that was definitely some hard work looking in all this tall grass, and it was even more complicated because it's grass on top of mud that you're not really sure when you're going to sink in. So we're looking at trying to find these nests, and once we find a nest, I would put a camera on them to see when they hatch and utilize that data for my research. And sometimes they hatch, and other times it was giving me data that showed that they were predated. And some other ways is looking at behavior. So seeing what hummingbirds are doing while there's food available. Are they all getting along like in this picture, or is one of them bullying the other and being territorial of the food or resource that is out there? And other ways that we study birds is looking at like how they're mating. So for woodcocks, we do something that's called a singing ground survey, where we go out and look at their on predetermined routes, where we go out and we are looking at and listening actually for their pink there. That's the call they make. It's a pink sound. So we're going out and counting the number of pinks we hear, and that kind of give us an estimate of the number of woodcocks that are in the area. And we do this in the later springtime, and sometimes the survey is a couple miles long along a predetermined route, and other times it can be in the double digits. So miles, it just depends on how many woodcock areas are in the particular route. And other times we're looking at window strikes. So a lot of times during bird migration, they sadly hit windows and die. So that can also help us to understand bird behavior when more are migrating through, whether it's nighttime or daytime, what times of the year. And also it can help us to discover new ways to prevent that. So coming out with bird-friendly windows or coming out with decals that you can put on your windows to help prevent bird strikes. And I already talked a little bit about the behavioral studies of actually observing the hummingbirds, but you can do that for other types of birds. And many times that's through using video observation, but also it's doing it the old-fashioned way through binoculars. Sorry. So what tools that can we use to help us study birds? So a lot of times it's, like I said, the old-fashioned way, or just using binoculars or scopes and sitting in one spot and counting the birds that you see pass, or it could be using binoculars to look at the behavior that the birds are actually doing. So sometimes it's like looking at the mockingbird's behavior, seeing if when you place a predator image or a fake owl silhouette in their territory, what are they going to do? Are they going to mob it? Are they going to do displays? So many times mockingbirds say one of their displays is showing their white arm bars, and that can kind of like scare predators away. So you're trying to see what they're actually doing in the presence of enemy or predator. But other times it's just watching the birds to see how they are interacting with each other. Are they stealing each other's food? What are their mating rituals like? Other times we are using cameras. I use my camera a lot just to study the birds' colorations. I'll go in more detail about this, but many birds, especially here in the US, the female is a lot duller than the male. The male has the brighter color. That's called sexual dimorphism, where the male and female are different in colors. So many times we utilize cameras to help us get a better picture of that color, but also it can help us get a sight on the band that the bird has. If we are not able to get in binoculars, we can take a picture of it and then later on go and enlarge the image and see the band number. And I'll talk more about those later. But bands, they come in many different sizes, all the way down from 0A up to be big enough to go on goose and even an ostrich legs. And when we put bands on them, we are utilizing those bands to help us understand where they're coming from, if they're caught in another area, but also where they're going eventually. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Another tool is using satellite tags and imagery to another way to actually tell where the birds are going. It's kind of semi-live depending on the satellite, and other satellites are passive, where they pass a beacon and it's reads them. And then MistNets again is a tool that is used in the combination with banding. So we have to use a MistNet. This picture right here shows what a MistNet is. It's basically a thin net that's placed in the bird's flyway in their habitat. So the birds fly into it, and we're able to capture them and extract them, and then we will look at them and then release them. And I'll talk a little bit more about misnetting and banding later. Other times it's just using old-fashioned notebook to just record the behavior that birds are doing. And we also utilize the public a lot. Maybe you are seeing birds doing weird behavior, or maybe it's a bird that you've never seen before, and you look it up and you haven't seen it, and it's not like a record in your state, so you can tell other scientists about it, or tell someone else, and we can come look at it and confirm that it is a new record for that area. Or sometimes birds are like during storms and hurricanes are blown off course and they're from another country, and they are here due to a storm. One instance, when I was in undergrad, there was a northern lapwing that was from Europe and had been blown off course and somehow ended up in South Georgia. And that was around Hurricane Sandy. And it was in South Georgia. So we got to take notice of that and watch it for a couple of weeks while I was down here. And then other times, some tools that we use are our senses. So smelling the birds, smelling the poop, looking at the birds, and touching. Obviously, when you're on banding, you're going to be touching those. And some other tools are books or field guides. So some of the field guides are somewhat simple and just tell you the bird where their habitat is. The others are more detailed and tell you where they breed at, where they overwinter at. It gives you examples of the male and female. And then other guides are even more detailed, and it helps you to identify the age of the book, the age of the bird. So it gives you the molt limits of the birds. So when the birds molt, like what to look for, and when the feathers are either if the feathers are frayed or if they new, and that helps us to be able to band the birds. And I'll go in more detail later about how we use the feathers to actually find out the age of the birds. So what ways do I use? I use a lot of banding and time spent waiting for the birds to show up during the banding process. It's not just, most of the times it's not, as soon as you open the nets, the birds fly in. Sometimes it's waiting for cycles for the birds to come through. And depending on if it's passerines, so like some birds, or it's waterfowl, sometimes the birds, especially with waterfalls, try to outsmart you and they will not go into the net, or they'll just eat the bait and then take off. So you have to wait hours. It's a long process of waking up before the sun is coming up, pinning the net up, and then waiting throughout the morning for the birds to either show up or if it's waterfowl, have enough so you can make a shot on the bird with the net. You don't want to waste effort by getting only 2 or 3 birds at a time. For waterfowl, you want the large group of them. So for passerines, which are some birds, a lot of times it's once you actually get them into the net and extract them, it's going over the birds and seeing what they are. So for some of the birds, like these right here is a prothonotary warbler. It's looking at their fat level. So, so it's looking at their fat level, like blowing their feathers out the way to see how much fat they have. And while looking at the fat level, you can tell if they have recently migrated or if they're getting ready to migrate soon, because they have more fat. So that fat is that energy stored up, they're going to use to migrate. If they don't have much fat, that means that they could not be migrating, or they migrated a while ago, so that fat reserve has already been used. And then we can also look at, for birds, the coloration. So with birds, the male and female, like I said, are different. The male is more colorful in most of the some birds. So that's, again, is sexual dimorphism. So looking at that, we can tell if it's a male or female, but also sometimes the color will help us know if it's juvenile or adult. So many birds have, the females and juveniles have similar colors. They're both dull, while the adult and mature breeding male is going to be more colorful. Now with these two birds right here, these are paternitary warblers. So this one right here in my hand is the male. It has a more golden color, whereas the female has like the dullish black and grays in it. So looking at those two, like if I had both of those in hand, I would be able to tell. Now let's say we have one that is a is a female and then one that's a juvenile, and they both look like this gray color. We'll be able to then look at the size of the bird. So we'll do wing measurements, and then next we'll look at the feather types. So with juveniles, we'll look at, so this right here is a brown thrasher. So with the juveniles, we will do the same thing that I'm doing with this brown thrasher, is hold the wings out and then look at any markings for it. So some characteristics that we'll utilize is like molt limits. So birds, they go through and they shed their feathers when they're aging. So we'll look at the feathers and see any characteristic that gives it away that it's an adult versus if it's a juvenile. So with this adult brown thrasher, we can tell it's adult by looking at the plumage, so the color of the bird's feathers. So for this one, some of the plumage is having its like rustiest brown colors. The chest area, the spotting of that is more brown. But then looking at some of these, like the coverts, so these up here are some of the coverts, the feather coverts, and they are pretty much all brown, and they don't have like a pale like underside or outline. So that lets us know that they're an adult. And then you can't tell it here, but there's no real fraying. So if it was more fraying, you can tell that those feathers are getting ready to molt. And these are more like what's similar. And then another thing to look for also that we look for is eye color. That also lets us know in some species if it's a adult bird or not. So with this brown thrasher, the adult has the golden eye, and then the juvenile has the brown, just a solid brown eye. And then for this is a magnolia warbler. It's pretty much the same thing. So with the magnolia warbler, it has the golden yellow, and then the females and the juveniles do not have the dark spots on it. But the way that when we're looking at birds, when we're looking at these birds and we're looking at these molt limits, know the age, but not like if it's 1 year old, 2 years old, 3, 4. It was let us know if it's a hatch year. So any bird that hatched that year is going to be a juvenile. But after hatch year lets us know that it's older than 1, but we're not sure if it's 2, 3, 4, but we just know that it's older than 1 year old. And the only way that we can tell if it's more than a year or more than 2 years old, if we catch the same bird the next year after we have put a band on it this year, then we can start keeping record of it. So it was like, okay, last year I caught it and it was a hatch year bird. This year it's a after hatch year, and this is the second occurrence of it. So this goes along, like once we have the band on the bird, we can look at the migration status of it. So we can see if it's migrated from another banding station utilizing the bands. So each bird band has like a unique code to that band that tell us the number that the bird number station or whatever station the bird was banded at, as well as when, like the exact date it was banded at, and also how many like banding stations have like recorded that bird as being at their station as well. And then also with banding birds, depending on where they're banded at or if caught in missing at, also lets us know what habitat they are utilizing. So if they're utilizing grasslands, or they're utilizing more forests, is the forest a like more close off forest, or is a open savanna? Because when we're putting out these bird nets, the mist nets, we're putting them in different habitat types that are throughout the area. So if we're at a park, we're trying to get a different subset of habitat types, so we catch a variety of species of birds in the area. So with waterfowl and geese, it's a little bit different. It's longer hours, and you have to sometimes get creative. So with Canada geese, when we're banding these, we're utilizing a lot of different tools. So we're utilizing canoes and kayaks to actually corral them into a giant net. So here in this picture, you can kind of see us corralling into a giant net. And then we take them out one by one, and we flip them over, and then we are able to, once we flip them over, we're able to tell if they're a male or female by looking at their cloaca and seeing what sexual organs they have. But then we're able to tell if they're juvenile or adult by looking at the feathers on the tails. So looking at the tail feathers, the juveniles are going to have a more like a V notch that is taken out of the top of the feathers. They'll have a V notch, where the adults will have a complete like triangle shape and not the V notch for a Canada geese. With the wood ducks that we are banding, it's a more of a kind of a wait process. We start out very early, weeks before we're actually going to band these ducks, setting out bait of different like weeks for them to come over as they're migrating through. They utilize the stopover site where we're going to band, so the ponds, the lakes. So we are putting bait down in order for the birds to kind of get used to where the net is. So we'll a lot of times put a net down, but it won't be like the actual net that we're going to use. It'll be a mock net, because we're not going to use the real net, the good net, to let it get weathered. So we'll put a mock net so they get used to the net being down there, and they'll eat the bait. So we'll do this several weeks, just feeding them, baiting them, so they get used to the net. And then once we have enough birds that are coming in by, we'll set out a banding date, and we'll wake up early in the morning. Sometimes that's 4 o'clock in the morning to be down at the banding station by 5 a.m. and set up the net. Now with the banding of ducks, we actually utilize nets that are like rocket nets. So they shoot out off the ground and cover the birds up. So we have to like detonate explosives, so the rockets shoot up and land. The net will land on top of the birds, and then we're able to go and get the birds out of the net. And that's when we can actually start banding them. And sometimes it's just a lot of waiting and watching the birds. And after like a lot of these birds, they are staying in the same flock. Excuse me. They're staying in the same flock. So if you band half the flock and the other half doesn't get banded, the ones that have been banded are kind of alerting the other birds like something's off, like I'm going to stay back. So you have to do this multiple times to try to trick all the birds, or as many birds as you can, into getting close enough to where you're able to capture them. And then once you capture them, that's when you can start banding them. Now, wood ducks are similar to the passerines. You can tell by the feathers if they're a juvenile, if they're a male, based on the feather pattern. So I'll start with these two birds right here. So both of these birds are males. One's a juvenile and one's a adult. So the adult one is right here. It's you can tell because it kind of has that pinch trout. It has the red eye, and then you can kind of tell some of the mahogany feathers are still in it. So this is what the males look like in breeding plumage. So when they're mating, they look like this. They have the beautiful greens and mahogany chest. This is like a crest. When it comes out, it kind of looks like a mohawk. And then when they're not mating, or if they're juvenile, they have a duller color that's not as like pronounced as the breeding pattern. But you can tell both of these are males because of the chin. And then if you look at the eye right here, this juvenile doesn't have the red eye yet. And if we go over here, looking at both of these pictures, one of these is an adult male and one of these is a juvenile. So for the juveniles, it has these like almost like teardrop shape on the feathers. But the adults, it's more of a straight line. So that's one way that we can tell by the feathers if it's a adult or not. Now this picture right here, these are both, one of these is a male and then the other is a female. So if you look at them, they look pretty similar, but there are some characteristics that give it away for the female. So if you look at the female right here, it has a teardrop shape eye. The white around the eye is teardrop shape and extends a little bit past the head, whereas with this male right here, it's not as pronounced and it doesn't extend past it. And also, if you look at the right behind the bill, the male doesn't have that. So that's another way that we can look at feather pattern for the wood ducks. Now, sometimes birds, they can also be tricky. So you want to make sure you're looking, we make sure that we're looking and double checking ourselves. So sometimes male and females, they can have like almost identical or switch feather patterns. So sometimes you have to flip them over and actually expose their sexual organs to verify that it's actually a doe, or it's actually a male or female. Because sometimes the patterns are almost similar. It's not gonna sway which way it is. So just be sure you have to flip it over before you can put a ban on it. So why do we ban ducks and geese if like people are gonna just hunt them? So we ban these ducks and geese because it helps us to understand what the population is doing. So when these birds are banded, they are, and then eventually when they harvest it or hunt it, the hunters will call in the band, or if they are hit by a car or something, someone can call in the band number and it'll let us know like where the actual bird traveled to. Then also by getting a lot of the bands that are calling are able to understand the population size, and then also like the distribution, how far they travel, wherever they're staying in. And then like some of the bands also help us again go along with add or decrease the quota for number of birds that can be hunted in the next year. So now this is what I'm up to now. So I did a lot of studying of birds for my master research and also working with the Fish and Wildlife Service. So now what I'm doing, I am a author for a series of pocket guides, so field guides for children. I'm advocating for myself and other wildlife and marine professions in the conservation field. The conservation field is it's a great field, but it's not always the best and safest field for everyone, especially if you're looking mentally. But there's certain advantages that other people in the conservation field may have and be treated differently. So I'm advocating for our rights. And also, I'm making sure that the field and just outdoors in general is more inclusive for everyone, whether they're sexual orientation, whether they're race, whether they're religious belief, their ability. I want to make sure that the outdoors is safe for everyone to be able to enjoy without harassment, but also make sure that outdoors is accessible. So that's contacting my local parks and make sure that they have equipment or make sure that they are fixing the trails if it's become a hindrance where people are not able to easily get across a certain area. And then I'm making sure I'm continue to expose minorities to the outdoors in practical ways. Sometimes that's doing things like going out and birding. Other times it's having a wildlife tracking sign like ID course. And other times it's by forming nonprofits like Black and Marine Science that is out there to help amplify and also encourage Black people to and get into marine science and show that there's a place for them to be marine scientists, to work in ocean science, and to share your research. I'm also doing that through Black Birders Week and let everyone know that it's okay to be interested in nature as a Black and person of color, that we all should equally have that access to nature. And starting out now as of this month, I'm a policy fellow doing marine policy, and I'll be working with fish and aquatic species and contributing to their conservation through the Fish and Wildlife Service over the next couple of months, over the year, I would say. So those are some of the things I'm up to now. In addition, continue to studying and enjoying birds.
Thanks, Alex. That was amazing. I had no idea you could look so closely at bird feathers to tell ages and sexes. And of course, there's always exceptions to the rules, so you gotta check to make sure. So now, if anyone has any questions for Alex, you can type it into the Q&A on Zoom, or you could type it into the chat, or not the chat, the comment section on Facebook Live. We'll give you a couple minutes to get those in. So I will start. Alex, what do you learn from bird poop? How does it smell differently?
Yeah, so I guess when I said the smell, like you can tell like how many birds are there. If you smell it, it gives you like you can tell that it's a great number there. More so, you are learning stuff from the poop when you're looking at the animals or the bugs that are in the poop, or doing like the chemistry, the isotope analysis. It'll let you know what other things they're eating.
I never thought to smell bird poop to see how many hummingbirds are in the area. That's fascinating. Mm-hmm. Anyone else has any questions? Type them into our Q&A or type them into our Zoom. We have one on Facebook. How would you recommend getting more banding experience? We've got, looks like a future birder.
Yeah, so honestly, this is what I did. So I got I my first experience banding was with Canada geese in Wisconsin. And when I got back home to Georgia, I was like, duck banding near me. So I Googled it, and a banding station popped up, and then I reached out to them, and I was like, hey, I'm interested in bird banding. Can I like come out and watch? And then they was like, yes, you can actually, we'll actually teach you. So definitely, you can Google bird banding stations near you. But check with your like local Audubon groups, to see if they have any affiliation to banding stations. And a lot of banding stations are looking for volunteers because sometimes during migration, there's a lot of birds coming in, but not many people. So they'll like more than happily like teach you how to maybe like first start with extracting the birds before you are able to band it. When you're banding birds, you actually have to get certified. But you can definitely like learn to extract birds, and that'll give you an idea like of what the bird species are while you're taking them out. And then while you're watching other people band, you can also kind of like hover over and get understanding of moat limits and identification.
Yeah, our local Audubon chapter is Black Hills Audubon, if any of you are interested. We have another question for Alex. In those photos where the bird is sitting on your hand, how did you get it to sit on your hand?
Okay, yeah. So those are different types of banding grips that we use. So after we extract the bird, I can go back and let's see. Okay. So this one right here, this is called photographer's grip. So you kind of are holding it with your two of your fingers and then like the legs between. So that's photographer's grip. So that's like if you want to take a picture of it. And then this one right here, and this one, the brown thrasher and Pretonia warbler, that is called banding grip. So you're kind of holding it like a cage so that the bird's not flying away, but you also can like work it up under so you are able to like blow on it to check the feathers out. Then you still can flip it over and pull the wings out. So once you extract it out of the net, you can hold it in that way.
So it looks like it's just sitting there, but you've actually got a grip.
Yes.
Another question, why are Canada geese so noisy when they're flying overhead?
Right. Yeah. I mean, they got to communicate, so they're communicating with each other. So like sometimes like the birds on the front bird it may be getting tired, so it's communicating like to let the next bird from the back come up, so he can fall back. And other times it's like there's like, oh, there's a water pond right there. Let's go down there. I'm paraphrasing what they're saying, but that's what they could be communicating. So they're basically just communicating with each other for different reasons.
So they're not just trying to be noisy, they're talking to each other.
Yes, yes.
What is the most interesting bird that you've studied and why?
Um, for me, I would say one of the most interesting one that I studied, I would say probably the seaside sparrow. Um, that's because it's a marsh bird and it's endemic. So it's only located in marshes. Um, and then sadly it's not listed yet, but the species is declining. But it utilized the marsh throughout the year, and like I said, it's building nests in the grass and it has learned to like build a nest depending on the tide level. So some years they will build the nest higher up, and other years they'll build it lower depending on what the tide is gonna be. So I'll say that's probably one of the most interesting ones I studied.
And then the next question is, where are you located again? Because none of the birds in these photos are local. So let the people know where these photos were taken.
Yeah, so I'm on the East Coast. So all of these birds are from the East Coast. So this one, well, they actually all can be found in the States. So these right here, these are Paternity warblers, and they're in Louisiana. This next one is a magnolia warbler, and this was in Tennessee, but you can find them up and down the eastern coast. This right here is a cardinal, northern cardinal, and it's up and down the east coast. They get it in as far as Minnesota. And then this one right here is a brown thrasher, and it's the Georgia state bird, and this was in Tennessee, but it's up and down the east coast as well. So none of these are West Coast birds, but
he'll come over here eventually, and then you'll get to see on his Instagram all of the birds here.
yes, I'm definitely trying to get over there. I want to see a stellar jay and some acorn woodpeckers. So,
have you seen any bird mating rituals? And do you have a favorite bird mating ritual?
Yeah. So I've seen a couple. Most of them are kind of like boring, but some of the like woodcocks and like whippoorwills, they're pretty cool because they like do have like an aerial display. So like what they'll do is they'll fly up, and as they're flying up, they will like make like a whistling noise, and it kind of sounds like a like someone's like gonna like drop something on a target, because like as they're twirling down, and they'll keep doing that. So that's pretty cool. And then others, the mating ritual is just like the beautiful colors of them being bright. Like one of my favorite birds that's pretty bright that I like is like the blue grosbeaks. They're pretty cool. Blue's my favorite color, but I like seeing their color. And then another one, some like eagles are pretty cool to watch. Just flying in air and them stealing other birds food. So that's pretty cool, especially like some of the adults stealing juvenile food while they watch them fish, and then they swoop down from a tree and try to catch the other bird, the eagle's fish. And sometimes the juveniles will drop it, and then the adult will just swoop in and get it.
Like our next question is, what bird behavior did you find had the most intricate social behavior?
It's a good one. I would say a lot of times it's surprisingly like this is one that I kind of like is crows. It's not one that I particularly studied, but it's something I learned. But crows, they actually can recognize human faces, and they can remember the face for 2 to 3 years, and they are able to like differentiate if you were good to them or if you were like mean or bad to them, and they can share it with the murder. So a group of crows is called a murder. They can share it with the group, and the group will also like know that you're a bad person, so to speak. So that was pretty cool to see, to read. And then another cool thing about crows is they're are very like adapted to city life. There's a case in Florida where they have learned to utilize stoplights to like crack open like nuts and shell things. So what they'll do is they'll drop their nut, acorn, whatever in the road when the light is red, and then the light will turn green and cars will run over it. And then when it turns red again, they'll fly down and eat it.
They're smart.
Yeah.
Another question we have is someone who's a retired U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They're interested in knowing more what that you see in fish and wildlife that they're doing to help bring more minorities into birding and wildlife biology fields. Are they?
Yeah. So for a lot of, I guess, bringing people into birding, there's a lot of urban complexes like John Hines and Philly, the Houston complex, where they're actually engaging people to come out and bird to see what it's all about. As far as getting more people into it, I would say that's a work in progress. But it's through listening to their employees, people like me, offering feedback, and showing them. And then another is through like hiring initiatives and programs like the Pathways program, where you can be a graduate or really any degree-seeking student and work with the Fish and Wildlife Service as a student. And once you're done with your degree, you can get converted over into full-time employment status. And then others, it's through working with groups like the Blackbirds group to work with them and offer educational opportunities through the Fish and Wildlife Service and partnering with them that helps showcase people of color, seeing that mirror of them, people who look like them, working in nature. Like I said, it's definitely a work in progress, and it's more needs to be done, but it's getting better than what it was before.
And then we've got running out of time, so we'll do one last question. I know you said you want to see some stellar jays, but is there a dream bird that you hope to see one day?
Yeah, there's a couple. I give my top three. So I want to see any type of penguin, but definitely an emperor penguin. I want to see that in Antarctica. And then I also I want to see a golden eagle. I haven't seen one of those yet. And then I want to see this one's on my top three. It's hard. I might have to get a top four. Then I want to see a Kia, and then I don't know. I just want to see also like a king vulture as well. King vulture is really cool. I don't know. They almost look fake. Like I call them like Play-Doh birds because it looks like they're like made out of Play-Doh. So I want to see a king vulture. So yeah.
Nice. So if anyone has any leads for Alex on where he can find those birds, let him know. Otherwise, thank you everyone for joining, those on Zoom and those on Facebook Live. Huge thanks, Alex, for taking time out of your night to present for us and share your love of birds with our community. Definitely fascinating to see all the different ways that you could study birds just by sitting and viewing or by handling them and looking through their feathers. That's pretty amazing. And then for everyone, remember that you can share this video. It will be on YouTube and it will be on Facebook. For those who weren't able to make it tonight, you can share it with friends so they can still view this. And then our next one will be on March 2nd. It will be about noxious weeds. So if you are interested in more of the plant life that we have here, that's what we will be covering. I hope you all got your drawings. Turns out that those markers were very colorful. Send us photos of your drawings if you did them. Don't forget to follow us on social media so you could share those photos with us, or you can send them to our email addresses. And for the month of February and March, we have our bird exhibit. So if you want to see some of our local birds up close and personal, we have some bird specimens on display for you. You can come visit the estuarium, see those birds, or join us downtown for our bird tours. We'll start those back up, walking around downtown Olympia, looking at the local birds, seeing if we can spot them, learning about restoration projects happening to help bring back birds into the city of Olympia. So thank you all for joining. I hope you have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you at the next Discovery Speaker Series.